A warm welcome to the show. Today we're shining a spotlight on a magnificent exhibition you can find at the Museum of Modern Art right here in Warsaw. It features over 200 women artists from the 16th century to the present. Across continents and centuries, the exhibition brings together a striking range of perspectives. Some of the most notable works on display come from Artemisia Gentileschi, Mela Mutter and Yoko Ono. To discuss, I have Alison Gingeras, curator, joining me here right now. Hello and welcome, delighted to have you with us.
It's such a pleasure to be here, thank you.
And congratulations on this magnificent exhibition. I had a chance to see it last night and I am truly impressed.
Thank you.
So I wanted to start by asking about the scope. Over close to 200 works of art.
Yes.
How long did it take you to put it all together and how many works of art did you have to go through?
Well, I've been working on this topic for 5 years. I have been actively working with the team at the museum for 3. I can't even tell you, I can't even count how many works I looked at because I was looking for specific things, but while doing that, going through different collections across Europe, I mean, even in Asia, in the United States, in South America. So there was so much to consider, and the way I built the exhibition was really to first obtain the precious loans of works from earlier centuries, and then around that build the different chapters. So it was a big process.
And can you tell us a little bit more about these loans? How did you go about getting them?
Well, I mean, I've worked in museums for 30 years, so thank God I have a lot of networks. Although my specialty, I'm more trained as a modernist, but my initial interest was in primitive Flemish painting. So I had a kind of foot in both worlds. And I had been writing a lot and knew certain key works or certain key artists. You mentioned Gentileschi, Sofonisba and Gusola. It also so happens that in my beginning of my research, I was so pleased to learn that the Polish collections, the national collections, have many, many women artists, even if you don't see them necessarily on display in the national museums. So that also really helped us. Some of the most precious works in the show actually come from Polish collections.
So the artworks are arranged according to themes. What are some of these themes?
So the chapters unfold not chronologically, but I would say in terms of the power of the iconography. So we start with a chapter called Femmes Fortes, which means strong women, allegories and agency. And it looks at the birth of a genre in the Baroque period where European queens were commissioning artists to make works about strong women, biblical women, classical mythology. So that's where you find Gentileschi, for example. Then we move really into the heart of the exhibition. There are 3 chapters that deal with self-portraiture. The first one is the palette portrait, Palettes and Power, which is a genre that women artists invented in 1548. Hence really the starting point of the exhibition. And the star there is really Sofonisba and Gusola and Lavinia Fontana. And we were just, bowled away to be able to get those loans to anchor our exhibition. And then from there, we talk about taking the artist taking herself as a muse, and then the surreal self and the mystical me. We also have a chapter about education and the canon, because as maybe some people don't know, but most art historians know that women artists before the 19th century were born into families where the father was an artist. Henceforth, they could be trained because they were banned from academies. So we try to unpack that story. And then we have a chapter called Anonymous Was a Woman, which is about how feminist art history urges us to look at and question everything, to go into the archive, to question attributions. So there are a number of really important works in that chapter. Then we have a chapter dealing with the female gaze and eroticism, which is named after Virginia Woolf. And then the last 2 chapters deal with really, very key issues of woman born, the question of motherhood, both as an experience and an institution. And the last chapter is called Wartime Women, which only deals really with World War II, the Shoah, and the current war in Ukraine.
So you've mentioned education, that women were not allowed to study at proper art schools until 19th century,
yes,
pretty much. So how did women art change after that time, once they were allowed in?
Well, I think even when they were allowed in, there were always sort of gatekeeping around genres. Even in revolutionary France, when artists such as David would take women into their studios, oftentimes it was only to learn portraiture or only flower painting or only this. So women always had, even when they were given an education, certain boundaries, and many of them transgressed it. And you see very quickly, that's why I think one of the most popular rooms in the exhibition is A Muse of Her Own, because it's there that we see that women really take themselves and unpack their identities and start to represent themselves in less classical ways. They start to invent new languages. They start to bring in like markers of their identity or their ethnicity or their class even. There's a wonderful work that I love of an artist from Alabama who's in her 90s, who made a quilt, and it shows herself in front of the American flag with a megaphone, and it says, "Listen to me." I mean, this is really about women's agency.
We've mentioned Artemisia Gentileschi a couple of times already. So what was so special about her? Perhaps you could tell our viewers a little bit more about her.
Well, when you study art history and you do your doctorate, they tell you that biography is not that important. And I think that feminist art history teaches us the opposite. I mean, Gentileschi was orphaned when she was 12. So she grew up with her father, who was a famous artist, Orazio, and her brothers working in his studio. Her first painting was made when she was 17, and that's the one we have here in Warsaw, Susanna and the Elders. And from the very beginning, she did not practice what women were supposed to do. She made a history painting. She made this allegorical representation of Susanna, not as a victim, as fighting back against these lecherous men. And that coincides with her story. She was raped by a fellow artist, a friend of her father. And she had to endure a trial to prove that she was raped. She was tortured. And it wasn't to clear her name, it was to clear her father's name. So after that, it would have been curtains for her. You know, her career could have been completely over. Instead, she left and invented herself. Her fame and her success just surpassed even that of her father, to the point where they didn't speak for decades. So she has an extraordinary story. And she even, some of us would argue, has invented more in terms of pictorial storytelling than Caravaggio. So I think she's a remarkable woman.
And the question of authorship. We said that Anonymous was a woman, it has been said, right? So what percentage of these unattributed artworks could actually be attributed to women? Are there any studies, statistics?
Well, there's one work that I really regret that we don't have, which is of the artist Michelina Vautier, and she's an excellent example. Unfortunately, the reason why we couldn't is that there's a major show right now in Vienna exploring her work. I mean, basically, she was a Baroque master whose work was entirely forgotten, either misattributed to her brother or filed away as anonymous minor Flemish painter. And it was only in 2018 that an art historian in Belgium made this case that, in fact, she was a major artist, had identified over 50 paintings by her hand, and she is even credited as the first woman artist to paint a male nude. So you can imagine that with a case like that so recently, there's many others that I'm sure we will find. And even in our exhibition, we make the case for such a painting.
I mean, there's a number of Polish artists who are featured at this exhibition, Karolina Jabłońska, Teresa Tyszkiewicz, Mela Mutter, and many more. So is there a unifying theme between those artworks? And how did you select these particular ones?
Well, first of all, there's so many different Polish artists. I mean, there's a whole group of Polish artists from the 19th century who were amongst this new generation of women who were trained sometimes in Poland, sometimes in Paris or Munich, such as Olga Boznanska, who, I was so pleased to learn not only is such a major figure of Polish art, but she organized these sisterhoods of the brush, these groups of women artists who are coming up together in this kind of solidarity amongst this new generation of women. And from there, we, go to the post-war period, and you see an incredible a range of strategies and styles. So in fact, it's not really about one unified, aspect of Polish women artists, but I can say that no matter what type of work they make, they are so strong and so unique. And having worked also, abroad in New York with some of these artists, people can't believe how there's just this endless supply of, from the 19th century till today, of Polish women doing things, in unique styles, different, powerful imagery. This is really, Poland is really on the map in terms of its women artists.
Mm-hmm. And how did you choose this place to present your exhibition here?
Well, I was invited by the Museum of Modern Art. I had curated a show there 3 years ago devoted to Aleksandra Waliszewska and symbolism from Eastern and Europe and the Baltics. And they asked me back when they were planning the new building about to open. I think it was very important to the director, Joanna Mitkowska, to make a really strong statement about women, not just women in the art world, but women's agency. I mean, we see in Poland that it was the electorate of women who went out and, helped sway the vote last time. And I think that as a public institution, we think not only about aesthetics, but also politics. So I think that when I proposed this much more broad than just modern project, they were thrilled and they really leaned into the challenge.
So what kind of challenges are female artists facing nowadays? Are they still being as challenged as they used to be?
I think that there is still misogyny. I mean, I'm an art historian. I'm not a market person, but if you just look at the art market, you see that women artists are undervalued. This last week, Frida Kahlo broke a record. Marlene Dumas, who's in the exhibition, is the most expensive woman artist. But it means that, it's taken actually the social movements that we've witnessed, whether in Poland, the women's strike, or in the United States, for instance, Me Too, for certain things to be taken seriously. I mean, art that deals with bodily autonomy, with reproductive justice, with even issues of sexual identity, are still controversial. And not every institution would be open to including those artists. And very deliberately, I tried to use the title, The Woman Question, to ask the question about what does it mean to be a woman today? I think it's important that we recognize that non-binary people or trans people can be under that banner and should be embraced in the exhibition, which is something that I was very mindful about.
And one last question, do you have a favorite artwork, your favorite artwork?
It's like asking a mom, who's your favorite kid? It's so difficult. So I'm gonna go with Sofonisba Engusola because she is the heroine of heroines, for the fact that she wasn't born. She was a 16th century artist who wasn't born to an artist's father. Her father had her educated outside of the home, and 3 of the daughters became artists. And she, she's just a remarkable artist that I continue to admire.
Alison Gingeras, thank you so much for joining us. Much appreciated.
It's been a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And thank you for watching Pulse of Culture. Please stay tuned for more here on TVP World.